Hello, okay, today I want to look at the questions that you will typically get in the English Literature GCSE exam. Okay, the purpose of today's tutorial is to break down the questions and think about what it is the examiner is actually asking you. If we think about answering the question, let's say ATQ, Okay, in order to answer the question, first we have to understand the question. I'll call that UTQ. So if we think about understanding the question, okay, we can start to look at the key words that are in the question itself. And the examiner has used certain words in a question and phrased the question in a certain way. Because they want you to answer the question, or ATQ, in a certain way. So I look back over the past year's exam papers and some of the questions that the teacher set you in school, and I've grouped them together in similar categories, and you can see that there's a lot of similarity between the questions that you're typically asked. So let's take the first one as an example. How does the poet convey vivid impressions of somebody in the poem? Now, if you're in the exam and you saw this, the first thing that I would like you to do in order to understand the question is to pick out the key words. So I'd say, how is a key word. Does the poet is a key word. Convey is a key word. Vivid is a key word. Impressions is a key word, and then of somebody in the poem. So obviously you're identifying who it is that the examiner wants you to think about. But the key words there, so how the poet convey vivid and impressions. Okay, now how means the examiner wants you to explore the the tools that the poet has used to make his point. Okay, some of the tools in poetry analysis might include, for example, imagery, okay, or some of the poetic devices. Okay, just to give you a couple of examples. Today we're not looking at answering the question itself, we're just looking at the technique of breaking it down. So how means that the examiner is looking for, the tools that the poet has used. The poet, okay, means that the examiner wants you to consider the poet in your answer. In every poem, the poet has put down on paper his feelings, his emotions, his views, his thoughts. It's something that he's passionate about, and he wants to convey that to you, the reader. So when you're answering the question in this sense, the examiner wants you to acknowledge that. So you must use the poet's feelings and why he wrote these words down in the poem in your answer. Okay, convey is the next key word, and convey means to show, or to portray. And you will see down in the other questions that there's a couple of other ways an examiner might ask you the same thing: convey, make, portray, demonstrate, and so on and so on. Okay, vivid is by definition something, strong, clear images that the author puts in your mind. Vivid, might be replaced with striking. Striking is also, a way of getting attention by being, powerful images or strong images. Powerfully or powerful. Memorable or dynamic, these are all similar words to vivid, which the examiner can use to get you to answer the question in a certain way. And then final, impressions. The examiner might ask you not for impressions but for feelings. Okay, and after which we just look at the next question, just jump ahead a little bit. Feelings instead of impressions. And the next question after that, thoughts, for example. So the examiner is looking, to ask you to write down something specific, in this case, impressions. Impressions are different to feelings, and we'll cover that in more depth in a future tutorial, but just, in brief, if you feel something, you feel anger, you feel hate, you feel admiration, you feel respect for something, you get the impression that somebody is something, or the impression of somebody is, they may be arrogant, they may be spiteful, they may be mean, they may be loving, they may be caring, but that's the impression that you get of somebody. So slightly different things. Okay, so the key here is that we are looking at the key words in the question in order to understand the question, which will help guide us when we answer the question, and specifically with the structure and how we answer the question in order to tell the examiner what he wants to hear. So if we have a look at a couple of the other questions, we can do the same thing. Okay, let's look at the next question. How does the author vividly convey her feelings of love for something in the poem? Well, if I was answering this, I would be circling how. So again, I'm looking for the tools that the author is using. The examiner wants me to consider how the author, has done something. In this case, vividly conveyed her feelings, and in this case it's feelings of love. So I would be looking in this poem, to see how the author has shown feelings of love for something, throughout the poem by using the tools, the imagery, the devices, the poetic structure, the themes, the tones, the words, the word choices, through the poem, which help convey in a strong and clear image in my mind, these things. So that's how I would look at the second question. Similarly, the third question, the fourth question. If we go down just a little bit further, slightly different question words, but it means pretty much the same thing. Explore how is the same as how, really, isn't it? So even if you get this particular question structure, it's all asking you the same thing, how, or the ways in which. Okay, the poet is the same thing. Powerfully expresses, instead of vividly conveys or strikingly conveys, now we're looking at powerfully expresses. And then it could be a particular thing. Powerfully expresses love in the poem, or despair in the poem. But the same thing. Understanding those key words in the question means that we will then be able to structure our answer to address each of those key points. And then looking a little bit further down, we have the what questions. So a slightly different way of asking you to consider the different points. Okay, so what are the poet's feelings towards something in the poem? What vivid impressions of something are portrayed in the poem? What you notice here is that the author or the poet is not specifically asked for, so that may be something you can use when you answer the question. What impressions have you formed of something? So this is not about the poet, this is about you. So again, a slightly different request from the examiner. He's asking for your impressions, not the author's. Okay, but again, I want to come back to make the key point here, which is when you're looking at the exam questions, take a moment to really understand the question. UTQ, by breaking it down into its key component words, and to really think about what it is the examiner is asking you to analyze in the poem or the prose, because that is going to help you structure your answer and direct the way you answer the question. Okay, I hope that's clear, and I hope that that helps a little bit, and I hope it makes sense. Okay, more coming later. Thank you.